Design and talk.
Thanks for having us. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name's Ben.
I'm Will.
And I'm James, and the fourth member of our collective, Ollie, unfortunately can't be here, but he would have absolutely loved to be, and he sends his regards to all of you.
So we're going to tell you a little bit about our 2009. I've got to be honest, we have had an odd 2009. It was exciting, it was kind of weird, it was definitely fun, and it began in this slightly nondescript pub in North London called the Birdcage. We were four friends. We don't really work in this industry. After putting our kids to bed, we met for a pint in the pub and sat in a window table, and we were talking, like many British people, we were talking about Brexit. Now, a couple of years earlier, the British people had narrowly voted to leave the European Union. And for us, it was actually quite a traumatic moment. We felt that our European identities had been amputated from us against our will, and we also felt that the global wave of right-wing populism had crashed into our country. And perhaps more than anything, we felt that the politicians who had campaigned for Brexit weren't being held to account for what was just described as the lies, lunacy, and hypocrisy of their statements in the campaign and since it. So we were sitting in this pub and we were thinking the mechanisms of accountability are broken, and we had this urge for some catharsis. We wanted to do something about it.
And at this moment, we were passing around a tweet that was doing the rounds, kept doing the rounds on social media. And you don't need to understand the ins and outs of British politics, but just this tweet from a former prime minister essentially saying, if you don't vote for me, there will be chaos in the land. And of course, this guy got re-elected, David Cameron got re-elected, and he's the one who introduced this referendum on Brexit. He's the one essentially, ultimately responsible for delivering the chaos. So it's a perfect example of the lies, lunacy, and hypocrisy that we were talking about. And everyone kept sharing it as this kind of slightly humorous catharsis, but we were worried that maybe he might delete that tweet.
Yeah, that was the biggest fear, that it would get deleted. And then we started talking about how can we turn this into a tweet that you can't delete. And we were chatting around some ideas around the table. Somebody mentioned like a large flag. And then we had a bit of a eureka moment where we all looked out the window together collectively. It was really funny, actually. And then we saw this 2x1, 6-meter by 3-meter billboard on the other side of the road. And we thought, well, let's go away and try and design this as a billboard and try and get some printed up.
So we found somewhere that would print it up, and it arrived at my house in an envelope that was even bigger than the guy that was delivering it. It was huge. It was 12 massive sheets of paper. And we found ourselves, therefore, going out at night, a few nights later in the freezing cold, trying to put up a billboard. Now, I have to tell you, it is quite difficult to put up a billboard. If you go online, there are no tutorials. It's not like how to bake a lemon drizzle cake or fix a bike puncture. Nobody on YouTube can tell you how to do this. So we went out, and I have to say that about half an hour before this video was taken, disaster nearly struck, and our project nearly ended before it had begun. Ollie, who's not here, was up the ladder on the first sheet, and the thickness of our wallpaper paste was, quite frankly, pathetic. And the first paper simply wouldn't stick. It peeled away. David Cameron's face was wrapped around Ollie's head. He threw himself against the billboard to keep it in place, while I ran back to the car and got some more thicker wallpaper paste. Cars were backing up at the red light. Drivers were looking out the window thinking, this does not look like a professional billboarding operation. I don't know what this is, but something odd is happening here. However, over the next half hour, 45 minutes, we managed to kind of assemble this jigsaw. And what we found when we stepped back was that we had a really visually arresting concept where we could present the hypocrisy and the lies of these leaders in a way that really elicited attention. And I found, for example, that a cyclist who was going past at this moment stopped. He looked up, he laughed, and that was crucial. Humour is an important part of our project. He laughed, looked me in the eye, and he said, "Nice, man, nice." So the next day I went down there and I took a couple of photos and we tweeted it out from our new Twitter account, Led by Donkeys. Now, we called ourselves Led by Donkeys because there was a phrase from the First World War, lions led by donkeys, that applied to the British troops, and it was a reflection of the disdain for the incompetent generals who led them into slaughter at the Somme. And we felt this was an apt phrase that would describe really where the British people sat in relation to their leaders. So I pressed send. And we were mildly surprised to find that absolutely nobody retweeted it, but that's because we had 0 followers. So I had to phone up a friend who had a lot of followers, and she retweeted it, and suddenly the thing exploded, and there you go, we had 2,700 retweets, and the whole thing just took off.
So the next day, all these people on social media saying, more, we want more of these billboards. But we've all got small kids, and we had other jobs to do, but we felt the urge to go back out there and get some of these quotes up. So pretty much every other night, we were up putting up one of these billboards. Here's us with our faces pixelated, because it was, let's call it a not very legitimate operation. And we like to think that although we weren't paying for the billboard space, we were borrowing it temporarily from companies that could well afford to for a good cause. So we went outside of London to a few different places, threw up a few of these quotes. This one, our now current foreign minister, here he is admitting that he doesn't know how important the Dover to Calais crossing is, which is the most important port crossing from the United Kingdom to Europe. This is a man advocating for separation from Europe. I mean, this is the kind of ridiculous stuff we were putting up. Here's another one of the Prime Minister at the time, Theresa May, saying basically if Brexit happens, it's going to make us more vulnerable to terrorism, yet she's still pushing it through. Here's another guy, a staunch Brexiteer, saying, yeah, you could have another referendum, something that he then completely flipped his position on. And then here, sorry, is our now Prime Minister who, in a private conversation with some diplomats, in response to the question, well, isn't this really going to damage your British industry? Brexit's going to be terrible. He said the following, and you'll probably guess by now that these were not actually all tweets. Some of these were just quotes, but the reason why we designed them up as tweets was because we felt very strongly that if somebody says this in a private environment or in Parliament or somewhere else outside of Twitter, it should be just as if they've said it as publicly. These are our politicians, they should be held to account. So we're very keen to use that format to visually communicate it. And so this is one of the last guerrilla billboards that we did. They were quite tricky. As Ben said at the beginning, we didn't know what we were doing, but we got better. But up here, just as we're getting the last panel up, there's a dog that starts barking off the bottom left corner of that picture. You can't see it. And suddenly, the lights behind us of this huge second-hand car forecourt all kind of flick on and go chung, chung, chung. And suddenly we feel like we're on a stage pretty much like this one with massive glaring lights. And there's a whole bunch of people, standing outside the Chinese takeaway who all turn around. And we're like, guys, I think we're busted here. But Ollie, who's really, really amazing in these environments, just says, own the space. Look like you're meant to be here. So we did. And, 5 minutes later, we were down on our way.
So after a long, grueling, sleepless night in Dover, we posted the pictures the next day, and it really exploded. And we were inundated with messages of people wanting to give us money to put these up across the UK. People who felt the same as us, and it was quite an overwhelming feeling of connection with other people. So we set up a crowdfunder, and we set a £10,000 target, and we gave ourselves a month to reach that target. And we smashed that target in under 3 hours. So we extended the target to £50,000, and we smashed that in just over 24 hours, and we ended up suddenly with £60,000.
What's that in rand?
It's more than £1 million, I think.
Yeah. So then, yeah. So yeah, I was a bit of an overwhelming moment. And then this was a transition from a guerrilla project now into a national billboard campaign. And you see this is a drone shot of a billboard in the north of England. We made a few adjustments to the design here. It says he didn't tweet it, he actually said it. We put a little disclaimer on there. And we put the source on all the billboards as well. And then we put hundreds of these up all across the UK. As you can see, all different designs, so many different quotes. We had a ton of these quotes, and it was an amazing feeling to see them going up.
And well done. Our count of Twitter followers was going to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000. So we had a really big platform to get this out. When you looked at who was following us, we saw loads and loads of MPs and journalists were following us. So we felt we had the opportunity, go back to that scene in the pub, where we had that cathartic moment where we could bring some accountability to this process.
So we've gone from this guerrilla billboard operation to now a national billboard campaign. But what we wanted to show you was that each individual billboard did something quite unique. So here's just one billboard outside a town in the UK called Derby. And we took a video of it, slapped it up on Twitter. The video gets over 200,000 views. It's shared, as you can see, I think almost 4,000 times. So it's really one billboard that might get ignored on the corner of a town, pinging around social media. But then something else interesting happens. The local media pick up on this story as a way to then cover Brexit. And they comment on the viral tweet of the billboard that then becomes the most shared and most commented on piece in the local media and on their related Facebook pages. So each individual billboard is, if you like, creating a local conversation around political accountability.
Yeah, each billboard really represents a piece of individual political street theatre and intervention in towns and cities across the country was really kind of influencing the conversation. Something that we did that interacted with the public. Jeremy Corbyn is the leader of the opposition in the UK, and we were frustrated with him because he wasn't saying anything at all about Brexit, either for or against. So we thought we'd put up a blank tweet and we would invite the public to come down and write on it what they wanted his policy to be. So we went down early one morning and chained a stepladder to the billboard and left 3 cans of spray paint and announced that it was open as a public kind of art intervention form. And people started coming down and writing on it what they wanted his policy to be. I was sitting across the road on the steps of the Arsenal football stadium watching this, and it was really heartening to see, like, you know, a guy driving past, looks out his window, goes round the roundabout, stops, gets out the car, asks what it's about, and then he goes up the ladder and writes his own message there. And this ended up being quite a big thing. It was the front of the Financial Times, and it was in the New York Times. But then a couple of nights later, the local council, Islington Council, papered over it because they said it represented illegal graffiti. And we sat there and we thought, that's so unfair. This is an important intervention. So we took a photo of that billboard and we put it into Photoshop and we surrounded it with an ornate golden frame. And we printed that out on 6 by 3 meters and we pasted that up on the same billboard. And we said, is it art? It's definitely not graffiti. And the council went, okay, you can keep it up.
A little bit of a change of tone here. This is Nigel Farage for you in the audience that don't know who he is. Donald Trump calls him Mr. Brexit, and here he is standing in front of a poster that he and his party of the time, the UKIP, launched during the EU referendum. And it's quite a disgusting piece of propaganda, actually. They're saying that the UK was at breaking point because of an influx of migrants, which is a complete lie. You can see on the text here at the bottom, it says, we must break free of the EU and take back control of our borders. So Farage is a real demagogue who's risen to success on the back of populist politics of fear, really. So we wanted to do something about this. We wanted to do our version.
It's worth saying, by the way, you know, these are refugees fleeing the conflict in Syria. And for them to say that they were the people that were responsible for our problems was outrageous. And on the morning that he unveiled this poster on this advertising van, an anti-Brexit, pro-refugee MP called Joe Cox was assassinated by one of Farage's supporters. So this was a real low moment for our country.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time trying to track down the exact same ad van that Farage used. And we went to the exact same location that he launched the post, and we invited the media down there. They didn't know what to expect. And what came around with the corner was a huge 5-day effort in Photoshop, a 40-gigabyte file with countless layers. And as you can see, here are all the people who we believe are responsible for the Brexit and the chaos of Brexit. You've got lead politicians, Rupert Murdoch's in there, and as you can see, it says the UK has been swamped by a tide of incompetence because we believe that these people, these incompetent people, are the real threat to the United Kingdom.
So at this point, we're constantly trying to think of new things. We're still running the entire operation as 4 friends through a WhatsApp group. We've never sent a single email despite having spent an eye-wateringly large amount of money. But this represents what is due to be the biggest protest march since the Iraq War. 1 million people are due to follow this route and end up in Parliament Square, outside Parliament, to protest Brexit. And we wanted to do something here. And we racked our brains for ideas. And finally, we landed on the idea of a crowd banner, one of those things that you sometimes see in football stadiums that people pass over the crowd. So what we did is Will here jumped onto Google Earth and dragged a little slider around to figure out how big this green was. And we jumped on Google and we looked up the first place we could find that we could buy one of these crowd banners. And yeah, we ordered a 40-meter by 20-meter crowd banner without having any idea how to deploy it, what it's made of, anything else. And critically, it was what, 5 days away or something? 5 days to go. So we have this thing due to arrive the morning of this massive, really important political moment, and we have no idea how to deploy it. But there's another problem that we figure out a couple of days in.
Yeah, well, now it's 3 days, and we want to create this amazing, iconic picture that defines the day. And we're thinking, how on earth are we going to get a picture of this? All the buildings that surround Parliament Square, they're not really high enough, and even if they were tall enough, we wouldn't be able to get in. It's Parliament, they're all government buildings. We thought, can we fly a drone? No, it's in the centre of London. Of course, you can't fly a drone there. Should we use a helium balloon? And then, yeah, a lot of phone calls later, we found a helicopter company with a license to fly over central London.
So this is the morning of the march. We're there in the square with a team of 30 volunteers. We've trained them how to do something we have no idea what to do. And so we're here pulling it out. You know, we're worried because there's elderly people, people in wheelchairs, kids in buggies.
The police don't know we're going to do this.
The police don't know we're going to do it. Nobody knows who we are. You know, we turn up discreetly with this 150-kilo giant sack, and we're rolling out over the, 1 million people, essentially.
I'm standing in the square at that moment. My 2-year-old daughter's on my shoulders, and I look up and I say, I know that's the BBC helicopter, and that means that must be the Led by Donkeys helicopter. And 10 weeks ago, I was standing on a street corner trying to get a poster up incompetently with thin wallpaper paste. How the holy shit did this happen? But we got this out, and as you can see, it's a quote by David Davis, a leading Brexiter. And it says, if a democracy cannot change its mind, it ceases to be a democracy. And this was a key thing that we wanted to get across. Yes, Britain had voted 52-48 for Brexit, but now the country had changed its mind. And the Brexiteers were saying we're not allowed a second vote. And we were saying the country's changed its mind. If a democracy changes its mind, it can change what happens.
Yeah, so we had scaled up. That was really successful. The video and the pictures really traveled around the world as far away as Australia. But we wanted to do something else. We were still largely ignored by the large media corporations, and we really wanted to hack into that kind of system and make these quotes more famous. So we're thinking, well, what do we need to do? Do we need to make them visible from space? So I'm just going to show a little BBC News clip here.
Yeah, this is the BBC Evening News.
Well, meanwhile, an anti-Brexit group has carved a giant portrait of Michael Gove on a stretch of beach near Redcar. The group, called Led by Donkeys, also painstakingly marked out a giant quote in the sand from the Conservative MP, in which he's quoted as saying, "We didn't vote to leave without a deal," in a newspaper article. By now, the sea will have claimed the satirical art on South Gare Beach, but the group says it wanted to make a statement for just one day.
So by now we're scaling up these ideas and we're using these quotes, as you've seen, all over the place. But there's one core truth that we feel needs to be powerfully communicated. And that core truth is, while the majority of the country may have voted to leave in 2016, they have now changed their minds. Millions of people who voted to leave last year now wanted to stay in the European Union. That's what the polls said. So we created this intervention, and we'll just let it play for you to watch.
I voted leave because of the NHS. I just can't believe I fell for it. Manipulated, wasn't I? Well and truly. Wonder how many more. People say to me about the 17.4 million people voted for this, and that's what they want. I'm one of those 17.4 million, and that is not what I want. That is not what I voted for. I want my vote back. I've had my vote stolen. I want it back. Nigel Farage says the other day that if there's no point in having another vote because it'd be even more Leave now than it was before. No, you know that it wouldn't, and that's why you don't want us to have it.
So it's worth saying that one of the reasons why we designed that intervention in the way that we did was that we wanted to kind of reclaim patriotism. Farage and Johnson and the Brexiteers were really trying to divide us as a country using the trappings of the nation and nationalism. And so we deliberately wanted to make a film about the rolling fields of England and use Elgar, the national composer. And it did really, really well, that film. So by now, the kind of project is metasizing. You know, we were heading towards 330,000 Twitter followers. We'd raised £1 million, which is 20 million rand. So it was the biggest political crowdfunder in history. And there was a lot of attention on the project. And so we decided, for the interest of transparency, that we would come out and say who we were. And we did that with the Guardian newspaper. Around the same time, Boris Johnson, the charlatan-in-chief, the man who had led the Leave campaign, became the Prime Minister, and he was put into that job to really make Brexit happen. The vote had been 2 or 3 years earlier, but it was deadlocked in Parliament, and Boris Johnson was put in there to get Brexit, this right-wing populist project, over the line. Now, this is a man who lied in his first job at the Times newspaper. He made up a quote and he was fired. He had run a campaign for 20 years demonising the EU with propaganda in his column in the Daily Telegraph. He had lied to every single girlfriend and wife he'd ever have. He doesn't even know how many children he has. And therefore, more than half the country found it abhorrent that he was about to become Prime Minister. So on the morning that he went to Buckingham Palace to be ascended to that job by the Queen, we went down there with a projector. This is a big projector. This is not the kind of thing that you watch Netflix with at home. This is called The Beast in our project. And we went there and we decided to give the Queen a message on this dark and thundery morning. So we got the projector out. The police were onto us very quickly and we didn't have long. But we got this message up. Your Majesty, your new Prime Minister is a liar. And that was another quite big intervention. The BBC covered it, which was quite rare, you know. And we felt that really our job for the next few months was to try to frame who we thought, and indeed most of the country thought Johnson was. I said earlier that we thought that the mechanisms of accountability were broken, and they really were. The print media was really in the pocket of Johnson. The owners of the newspapers were very enthusiastic about Brexit and very enthusiastic about Johnson as a Prime Minister. And the broadcasters, we felt, were a little bit scared of the government as well. The government was saying, for example, they might shut down the BBC or end the licence fee. And we felt that they were really scared of calling Boris Johnson a liar. But I have to tell you, Design Indaba, we were not scared of calling Boris Johnson a liar. So this is the Houses of Parliament with the Beast, once again, on the evening when the Supreme Court in the UK had ruled that Boris Johnson had lied to the Queen about the reasons that he shut down Parliament, suspended Parliament, in his effort to get Brexit through.
And you're all thinking, surely he can't lie about anything else. But he's also lied about the NHS, the National Health Service, which is a source of pride for so many British people. So here we've done another huge message on a beach. You can see it says, you can't trust Boris Johnson with our NHS. But this isn't our message. If you look closely here on the end, you can see 6 blue figures. This is actually a screenshot from a video, which we don't have time to play the whole thing. But these are doctors and nurses who work in the NHS. And this is their message to the British people. Again, on this we work with some teachers. This is Boris Johnson quote that they painted. And he's basically sticking up for the bankers after the crash in 2008, which plunged the UK into a decade of austerity and has seen huge cuts across public sector services and especially in schools. Schools have been massively affected. Here you can see me standing under the Angel of the North in North England. It's a really iconic piece of art. It's an anti-Gormley piece. And it just wanted to show this as an example of, we really tried to take this message like north, east, south, west, all over the country.
And that was basically our autumn. We went around the country pointing out how untrustworthy this man was. And everything was looking good. Public opinion was saying people wanted to stay in the European Union. Public opinion was very much against Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. But something disastrous happened in December. And that disastrous thing was a general election was called. And what happened in that general election was that despite only winning 43% of the popular vote, so he didn't have the majority of the public vote, and despite a majority of people voting for political parties that wanted to stay in Europe, because of our broken political system, where it's a winner-takes-all system, and because of the divided and weak opposition parties, he's still got a majority in Parliament. And that meant, tragically, that he could drive through his divisive Brexit project on the 31st of January.
So that meant that 4 weeks ago, we did leave the European Union. And as I said, it was quite a traumatic moment for us, but we were really busy trying to fashion an intervention at that point, because we were worried that when people in Europe and around the world turned their eyes to the UK on Brexit Day, that they would see a side of our country that we didn't think represented the true spirit of our country. We thought that they would see video of Nigel Farage waving his little plastic British flag, or Boris Johnson lying, because every time he opened his mouth at that point, he was lying. And we really wanted to elevate different voices and give different people the chance to represent our country at that moment. And we put our heads together. We tried to design an intervention. We thought, who would be the best people to speak for our nation at that point? And we thought it would be veterans of World War II who had fought and liberated Europe. The people who were themselves traumatized that they had passed on to the next generation the precious prize of peace, and they thought that that was perhaps slipping out of their hands now with this rise of right-wing populist politics. So we found Sid, a 95-year-old, and Brigadier Stephen Goodall, a 98-year-old, and the week before Brexit Day we went out and we filmed them, and we said to them, we're going to project you onto the White Cliffs of Dover, these famous cliffs that look out over Europe. So what would be your message to Europe? What would be your message to the world on the morning of Brexit? What do you want to say on behalf of our country? And we quickly edited that video and got it out that morning. And it ended up being really quite a big intervention. As you can see, it got 50,000 retweets, 3.5 million views on Twitter, but about 10 million in total on social media. But really, more importantly for us, it was shown on the television around Europe as a representative of what one half, at least, of Britain was saying and thinking at that moment. So, for example, this film was shown in its entirety on the French national TV news after the Six Nations rugby game. And so we want to show you this film, and this was our intervention on Brexit Day to try to say there's a different side of Britain.
I'm Sid. I'm 95 years of age. I'm an ex-World War II veteran.
My name is Brigadier Stephen Goodall. I am now nearly 98 years old.
So what I would like to say to you now in Holland and in Germany and France, Belgium, everybody, this is a message from the White Cliffs of Dover, from Britain.
I feel really depressed at the idea that we are leaving Europe, because it has meant so much to me.
I feel very, very sad about it all, because you don't know which way things are going.
I like to be called a European, and the feeling that one has of comradeship as one goes round Europe is really quite something.
First of all, I'm Welsh, and I'm British, and I'm European, and I'm a human being.
At my age, I shan't be living much longer, but I hope that for the sake of my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, that England, Britain, will move back to be much closer to Europe than what we have done now.
So let's all think of these lovely cliffs. Look from your side to this side, see these white cliffs, and we're looking across at you and feeling we want to be together. And we will be together before long, I'm sure.
So this happened on the morning of the 31st, but we had another plan for the evening of the 31st. And that plan was this. Nigel Farage, the guy you heard about earlier, the real right-wing, divisive, racist politician at the heart of all of these problems that we're facing, wanted to throw a huge party. Okay, in Parliament Square, that same place we unfurled that massive banner. And he wanted to call on everybody to bring their Union Jacks and their flags down and pretend this was a moment of national celebration, pretend this is what the country wanted, when in fact, they didn't want it. And we wanted to have some fun with him at his big moment and tell him that actually he doesn't represent the patriotism that we know, or any sort of pride that we might have in our country. And so we wanted to go down to that square with the biggest Union Jack at that moment. But there was one special thing about it. It would have a hidden message on the top of it that nobody would see, and it would sail over the crowd, and it would go towards Mr. Nigel Farage at his big moment, and he would see the message, and so would the world's media, and that message would be the one down here in front of you, and it would say, "Brexit is a lie." Now, we got down to that square, and we looked around at all the people who were there, and we've always had this principle at Led by Donkeys that we don't punch down, we punch up. We never had any issue with other people who may think politically differently to us. Our hostility is reserved for the politicians at the top, the people who've led all of this madness and made it happen. So we decided in that moment that it wasn't right to deploy that crowd banner, as much as we would have loved to shame that bastard Nigel Farage. But what it does mean is that we've brought it here tonight, and it would give us the absolute greatest pleasure if you could close the circle on this chapter in our work for us and let us sail this crowd banner over this incredible audience here. So
I think you're going to have to bunch in a bit in the middle. Stand up, everybody.
So if you can stand up, and feel free to make some noise as this comes over. We're going to pass it over the crowd. Just pull it over your heads, and when we get
bunch up into the middle.
You guys go start pulling it over, and as it gets to the sound booth, I'll tell you to change direction, then you pull it back down towards me. So if you guys go.
Yeah, but there's a beautiful thing here, actually, that there's the kind of herd mentality that's a microcosm possibly of the world that we want to see, where everybody's going to know what to do automatically to make a collective project happen. So pass it over your heads.
And keep going.
And keep
wow.
going.
Make some noise.
What a beautiful
Make some noise! Woo!
Amazing, incredible. Well, it's been the greatest honor for us to be here tonight. We're Led by Donkeys. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.